Welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show on News Talk 95.1 FM, 790 AM, KFYO. On the phones with us right now, live from Washington, D.C., Congressman Jodey Arrington. Good morning, sir. How are you?
It's always a great morning on fly-out days when I'm leaving the swamp for the Great Plains of West Texas. So I'm doing great. How about you?
Well, doing well. Glad to have you on the program. Obviously, there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, where do we begin?
Yeah, where do we start? I guess let's start with Obamacare and the repeal and replace. You gave a passionate speech about repealing and replacing Obamacare, that the Senate, basically get your stuff together. This needs to be done. We have all promised, and you were talking about Republicans, have all promised to repeal and replace Obamacare. You were part of 12 lawmakers, freshman lawmakers in the House who had an editorial calling for the Senate to act on repealing and replacing Obamacare. I'll be honest, from where I sit here in Lubbock, Texas, it's not looking good, Congressman. What are your thoughts? Are they going to get this done?
Well, my thoughts are I'm as frustrated probably and disappointed as anybody back home. We worked hard and diligently to get it over to the Senate. And as you and I have talked about, a frustration of mine is when we are negotiating with ourselves as Republicans, as conservatives. Yes, there are people who are more conservative than others. I've discovered that when as I've arrived here to work in Washington on behalf of the folks in the district. But we've got to be able to get something done and deliver results on this. And we gutted Obamacare. We repealed the mandates, the taxes, the regulations. We did all. To me, it's not perfect, but we did I think the right steps out of the House, and you can't get it out of the Senate. They're talking about doing the 2015, taking a vote on that repeal. But if we don't do something, the odds are not in our favor when you have a Republican president. The midterm elections, historically, you lose 32 seats in the House. We have a 24-seat majority. So we're going up against the odds here, and it will not turn out well if we, as the Republican conference, Senate and House-wide, cannot deliver on the centerpiece of our policy agenda in the last campaign.
Congressman, the president has said, he mentioned this day before yesterday, I believe, well, if the Senate won't pass anything, we'll just let it fail, and it won't be on us, and we're not going to take, I guess we're not going to own it. We're not going to own Obamacare. We're just going to let it fail, and then Democrats will be forced to work with the Republicans. What are your thoughts on that thought process? If the Senate can't move forward on Obamacare, is it smart to just let it fail? And do you think Democrats would actually work with Republicans?
Well, I don't know if that's just negotiating posture on behalf of the president, which, I think, again, when you have just a few folks that are not willing to, they would rather negotiate with the Democrats and punt the ball and prop up the current individual Obamacare exchange market that's failing. Listen, Chad, if there was ever a sense of urgency, if there was ever a crisis to jump in the middle and fundamentally change the course we're on from a healthcare standpoint, it's now. If we shovel a bunch of money and prop the system up for a couple of years and then try to come back to the table, look, I don't have a lot of hope for doing something positive and conservative in that scenario. I do now. So I'm a big believer in taking the vote. People say that they're against it. I like to have them on record. That's how I do business. If you don't put your name to it, then, you can't be accountable. Hold people accountable, call the vote, don't give up now, and just keep pushing and keep putting pressure on the Senate. That's what I'm trying to do from over here as best I can.
Visiting with Congressman Jodey Arrington. So what do you think? What do you think the odds are that the Senate actually gets something done now that the president's put pressure on the Senate? Now that they're going through this one more chance negotiating, and the HHS went back and looked at the Cruz amendment, and it came out that, oh my goodness, it would lower premiums and it would actually encourage people to buy insurance. So where do you really think we're heading?
It's amazing what happens when you free the markets up and you give people real choice. That premiums go down, and yet, and you hear all this hue and cry from folks who want us just to fix Obamacare. The premiums have gone nothing but through the roof and to the moon, and now you've got Republican solutions that are being scored that in a way that shows premiums going down. That's the whole goal, the cost of care going down. I think there's a 50-50 chance that you can get something out of the Senate. It may be the 2015 repeal, the straight repeal, which again, we just got to deliver something. I mean, we're not even in our legislation out of the House. It doesn't fix everything. We said before, interstate competition, we had to pass a separate bill that's going to need 60 votes out of the House. We passed an association health plan. We passed that out of the House. Tort reform, we passed that out of the House. Antitrust exemptions for insurance companies and doing away with that, we passed that out of the House. So, I mean, we've passed the stuff that requires 60 votes, so it can't all be, stuffed into the package of the reconciliation Obamacare repeal, but we're moving it out of the House, putting it at the Senate, on the Senate's desk for them to act on. So I think they get that 2015 repeal, at least it's something, but I would prefer not to prop up the current exchange market for 2 years. I'd rather start transitioning to a true market-led, patient-centered healthcare system.
Congressman Jodey Arrington on the phones with us here on the Chad Hasty Show. Let's, if you don't mind, we're going to go ahead and take the break. And when we come back, I want to talk about the budget and tax reform and how these two will work also with the current repeal and replace efforts going on, how they're all tangled together and where we are on the budget. So, Congressman, I'm going to place you on hold. And when we come back, we'll pick up on that conversation. Welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show on News Talk 95.1 FM and 790 AM. KFYO. Congressman Jodey Arrington trying to get back to Lubbock, Texas. That's what he's trying to do. Get out of the swamp is what he said earlier. Congressman, thanks again for joining us today. We obviously spent that first segment talking about Obamacare. And one thing that we keep hearing is that the reason why Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan and others wanted to go after repeal and replace first is not only because of the campaign promises for the last 7 years, but also because it would help set up tax reform and even help out maybe with the budget process. You're involved in the budget process. How does repeal and replace tie into everything? Are we still going to see tax reform come down the pike if we don't have a repeal and replace bill go through?
Yeah, so it's true. You've got not only was it the centerpiece for the agenda for all of us in the campaign, that is repeal Obamacare, but also and again, I think the long pole in the tent for economic recovery and growth and job creation is tax reform. And we'll carry over, if we pass the one that we passed out of the House in terms of the health care reform bill, we would save $1 trillion that we would move into tax reform that would lower rates for businesses, individuals, and families 10%. That's a 10% rate reduction right there. And not to have that is going to make less meaningful tax reform. The other is deficit reduction. I'm a budget hawk, and I believe that the greatest threat to the future of this country and to everything that we want to do, which is we want a good, strong, safe supply of food and a reliable safety net for farmers. We want our military to be equipped for the threats that we confront. We have a lot of needs, but if you go into a sovereign debt crisis like Greece or Puerto Rico. You can't do any of that. So we have over $100 billion, and it's even more significant in terms of reduction in the Senate of deficit reduction. You combine, let's say, a 150 out of healthcare reform and deficit reduction with the recent budget we passed, where we reduced mandatory spending by $200 billion. We haven't cut $200 billion in 20 years for mandatory spending. You combine that, Chad, and now you're really walking it back in terms of reducing the national debt and getting good financial footing, not just for today, but most importantly, so that our kids can experience the American dream and all the opportunities that we've had.
Visiting with Congressman Jodey Arrington. Let's look at the budget. You've been obviously very involved in the budget. Where are we right now? Where are we on the priorities of the budget? And what would it look like as far as cutting debt or stop adding to the debt?
Well, we achieved the goals that I hoped going into the budget, and here were the goals. Rebuild the military. It's been cut dramatically over the last 5 years as the threats increased dramatically. So our guys aren't prepared, and it's not good for their safety, but it's also not good for national security. So big down payment on that, where we increased, to the tune of about $80 billion. We went above what the president requested, but we didn't give everything that the House Armed Services wanted. So we had to make some compromise there, but a good down payment in rebuilding the military. Number two, the national debt. Again, you know my feelings about that. Mandatory spending makes up that. This is the spending that's on autopilot. We don't debate it. We don't review it. We just spend it. If you qualify for the program, you get the money. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't some good things that come out of the social safety net. I'm just telling you the social safety net is not sustainable. I'll also tell you some of the social safety net is not responsible policy. For example, we cut $10 billion in food stamps. That's tied to work requirements for able-bodied people. That's compassionate because we want people not to be trapped in poverty. We want them to have upward mobility. And it's also fiscally responsible and good stewardship of the taxpayer money. So I think we've done. I think we've made a significant headway in deficit reduction and towards balancing our budget and reducing the national debt. Then the last three would be. The last two pieces would be we initiated tax reform in this budget through reconciliation, and then we also funded what we needed, not everything we wanted, but what we needed for our national priorities. And, Chad, I'd include protecting the safety net for our farmers, the crop insurance, and the market risk insurance, because, as you know and your listeners know, it hasn't worked. It hasn't been reliable. The prices have dropped through the bottom. We've lost more foreign income than we have since the Great Depression. So I along with Mike Conaway and others, we were able to pull that, protect that, and reduce in areas that we think are not just good areas to reduce, but ripe for reduction, like the supplemental nutrition, or as most people know it as food stamps.
We had a question from a listener who asked if there were any cuts to any welfare cuts in the budget.
Oh, sure there are. I mean, the food stamp program is one of them. You've got other welfare programs throughout the budget over the 10-year horizon. But you also have, for example, and a lot of folks may not know this, and I must say I learned a lot over the last 6 months on the Budget Committee. I've spent more time in that committee than anything else combined that I've done up here in terms of Farm Bill and VA. But $140 billion that we spend as a nation in improper payments. $140 billion a year. Over 10 years, the last 10 years, it's been over $1 trillion. And 90% of that, Chad, is overpayments. Okay, so we're paying people that are off of some program, or they've died and they're still getting checks from the government. So there's a lot of just good old-fashioned manage your business better stuff in this budget, along with reforming programs like food stamps. And then again, the largest entitlement reform since the Great Society is our health care bill and in reforming Medicaid.
Congressman, I want to ask you in the time that we have left, I want to get you to respond to a story. It came out from Politico, I think it was last week or maybe a week and a half ago, and it was about Mike Conaway and Mike Conaway saving the farm bill. And in it seems as though some ag lobbyists took a swipe at you. And, Politico mentioned that you serve on both the ag committee and obviously the budget committee. And they said that some ag lobbyists questioned whether Representative Jodey Arrington, whose district neighbors Conaway's, went to bat for farmers that he represents.
Yeah, I'd love to. First of all, I think when the lobby in general takes swipes at you, that's probably a positive sign that you're doing the right thing, because I don't represent lobbyists. I represent real people in West Texas, real farmers and ranchers and people in the agriculture industry. And, the lobbyists are there to get 100%, for example. They'd like for no cuts to be made at all from the Ag Committee, including food stamps. Well, that's not, I never made that deal, and that would suggest that I'm willing to not reform with responsible sort of work requirements for able-bodied people and help save the union literally for our children, just to save a program that, quite frankly, is in desperate need of reform. I don't believe that's not fighting for the farmer. I've talked to farmers and have had conference calls with them. I'm telling you, they believe that everybody needs to do their part to contribute to reducing the national debt. They believe that welfare programs need to be reformed, and they're very pleased with the fact that we protected the safety net. The farm safety net didn't get any cuts. It was attached to food stamps. I'm proud of that. They're pleased with it. So I'm not very concerned about the ag lobby and what they think about fighting for farmers.
Congressman, as always, we appreciate it, and we will speak again shortly, I'm sure.
Thank you, Chad.
Have a good one.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
That's Congressman Jodey Arrington here on the Chad Hasty Show.